Call to order the Citizens Budget Review Advisory Committee for Monday, August 1st, 2016. Would you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Ms. Watson, roll call, please.
Deanna Farmer, absent. Michael Frank, absent. Harry Hall.
Present.
Sergio Moda.
Present.
Tim Slavin, absent. Terry Taylor, absent. Ed Herlihy.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and we'll put off the approval of the minutes, seeing that we don't have a full quorum tonight. And the next item is unfinished business. Mr. Kilgore, you're on.
Good evening. I'd like to start with a presentation that Frank Watanabe, our city engineer, has volunteered to make on our street paving and road work budget and where we stand as far as the status of street work.
Good evening. Again, Frank Watanabe, your city engineer. Give me a minute to get this up. I think we're set. Here's the projector. Do they see it back there? In terms of... Okay. Again, good evening. Frank Watanabe, your city engineer. Just wanted to go through this quick little PowerPoint presentation to show you where we have been and where we're headed with our capital projects, mainly on our street paving. Just this year alone, early in March, we did a pavement assessment, which we do every year. This is the latest one we did for 2016 that shows the map colored in the different colors, purple being bad, green being good. The green shown on here is just for the last 5 years. So everything else beyond that is still green. So it's really just to rate the yellow, the orange, and the purple. So you kind of, in the pictorial, you can see where all the roads are. And we've done a lot in terms of, in the last 5 years, all the green streets we've done. So we've done a good job. This is a comparison between 2015 and 2016 in terms of the pavement conditions we've had and in terms of the percentages you can see. So we're still staying within the same parameters. We have been working on our street program, but as we keep working on our street programs, streets are also failing. But overall, if you take a look at the 2016 of the poor and bad conditions combined, we're within the 7 to 8%. That's well better than most cities. If you look in any cities, large to small, majority of streets conditions they have in terms of percentages are in the 20s and 30s. And so we're way below the 10%, so we're way better than most cities. However, it doesn't say we're in great shape. It just says we're in a better shape than most cities because these dollars are in huge dollars. We're talking about millions of dollars to do major reconstruction. So I just wanted to highlight that overall we're in pretty good shape. However, we need to keep moving forward. This year alone, because of the Budget Committee and the City Council, we approved and did some millings and resurfacing. This is the pictures that we've shown. We've done parts of Benedictine, Concha, Bevan, and Melrose. So we got into a few of the streets, but we still need to do what the Finance Director has talked about as catch-up work. We still need to finish up the remaining streets that we haven't done. This was just to get it going. Just want to highlight then, we're looking at this coming year, so what you're looking at for coming year for street repairs and improvements are listed right here. Versailles, which is the remaining parts of Versailles that we didn't touch as a reconstruct. This is a reconstruct where you have to tear out the base, put it back in like we're going to be doing on Barber Street. The other half of Versailles is just a milling and a resurfacing or milling and paving. So that'll be another chunk of the money. And then they had the remaining parts of Concha that we didn't do, the remaining parts of Bevan that we didn't do, the remaining parts of Schumann that we didn't do. And I left it more in terms of citywide milling and resurfacing because depending upon how bad these other streets get, we'll identify which ones are the more important ones because within a 6 months to a year time, what we may say was okay will all of a sudden get worse. And a lot of it's due to rain and stormwater and impacts of that onto the roadway. A good example was last year, Melrose wasn't that high, and then within a short time, it got real bad. And it's just a toss-up. And then when we tore the road up, the base was in real great shape. Several of those streets, I thought the base was going to be in poor conditions. It was in great shape. We caught it just in time. On all the streets we caught this year, the asphalt company said you caught it just in time. So we were in good shape this year. Hopefully we'll be the same with these milling and resurfacing streets. The following year, we have other streets we still have to do day drive. It was on for this coming year, but because it's such a small local street, I believe we could push it off. I think we could do some patchwork to keep it going. And then on 2017, take care of day drive. Again, it'll be milling, resurfacing. Damask, there's a section of Damask that's already in pretty bad shape. That'll be a reconstruct. The remaining sections that we haven't touched yet, like Rolling Hills, that has to be milled and resurfaced. And then again, it's a little bit more in terms of the citywide milling and paving. That shows up in terms of this would be the 2017, 2018. Then finally into the future 2018, 2019 year, we're looking at, of course, along the riverfront, we need to do Indian River Drive. We need to mill and repave that street. And then from that point on, I believe about 250,000, that range on going to set par for all of our city streets in milling and paving. I believe we've got most of our streets under control for reconstruct. From that point on, it'll just be milling and resurfacing. And that'll continue to perpetually keep going on because there's always going to be streets that's going to start falling back into disrepair. But as long as we mill and resurface it, I think we'll be up to where we should be, where we should maybe have only about 5% of or less than 5% of our streets that has to be looked at. So overall, if you take a look at where we sit, this coming year, about 900K. The following year, 400K. 2018, 2019, that 450. And then from that point on, I believe at $250,000 on an annual basis, I think we'll be at par. Would that ever drop below it? Probably will. But if you don't spend the money into it, eventually you'll be back up to the $1 million, $2 million. And on some of these streets you see some cities that have $50 million, $20 million. We're not even close, but we have to put some money into it today so we don't get to that position. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, gentlemen? Sergio?
I just have one question about Concha. I've talked to a couple of individuals that live on Concha, friends of mine, and their concern is, of course, the speeding that occurs on Concha. Their problem is, since the repaving of Concha, of that portion of Concha, a lot of individuals have, on occasion, taken on their purview to speed at constantly high levels. And there have been discussions amongst friends of mine about the need of a stop sign. I know recently the police department, they've put a speed radar. I was wondering if in the future, in the near future, there are plans for some sort of stop sign or some sort of control, some sort of solution to control this speeding problem on Concha.
To help answer your question, I think the city is growing, and I think the age of the city is changing into the point where I've been here for 10 years, and for the last 7, there has been very little, I call it traffic calming, where you have a lot of speedings, you have people rolling stop signs. Lately now, in the last year, we've had a huge influx of people calling in regarding traffic calming. This year, the city council approved a new traffic calming program because of all these concerns. Right now, I probably have 5 investigations going where we've actually installed, like a good example, Bevan, we paved it, and then we put an always stop at Bevan and Genesee. We're currently looking at several other locations. That includes Benedictine. We're finishing one at Fleming. We finished one at South Easy at Winboro, put an always stop there as well. We're finishing one right now at Rosebush, and we put a new stop at Rosebush and Persian. So it's jumping these traffic calming. We will start taking a look at it. My concern is when you start paving streets and you add just a little bit more paving, the speed starts to increase. Because if the streets are in better condition, hate to say this, the potholes were kind of like the reverse speed humps, and it did slow down vehicles. But now that, like Concha, I had other concerns with people along Concha saying they're speeding now. We kind of expected that. And on some of these new streets that we have repaved, people are taking advantage of it now. But we will look into it and see what we can do as a traffic calming. Within the city's traffic calming, as part of the investigation, if it meets certain requirements, and that's in they call it the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the MUTCD, your engineer, your city engineer, if he makes a judgment call that says an always stop is needed, I could put an always stop in. Under the MUTCD, it says that. If an engineering study demonstrates the need for safety improvements, we can install a stop sign. And I think it does help. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it did, and I appreciate your comments and the whole process of trying to get a stop sign or finding a solution towards that problem. I do sincerely appreciate that. I know a second question, if I have time, is I know one of your concerns was trying to find money for the Barber repaving. I know you wanted to elevate the road on Barber, and there was enough money at the time to complete that project. I know one of the items you talked about earlier was the danger of the stormwater and the heavy rainfall is going onto the roads and corroding. And I just want to make sure that with Barber, it has a long lifespan. I guess that's that's my point. I don't want it to see. I don't want there to be heavy rainfall or there to be an issue with potholes or we get down the road where there's an issue about maintenance on Barber, and that's my only concern with Barber. I know it's a very heavily, it's one of the main arteries of the city of Sebastian, and that's just a concern of mine.
Just to highlight, the current project that's out right now, the construction, it starts actually, just to let everyone know, it starts as of next Monday. We will start closing portions of Barber Street, the northern half between County Road 512 to Salem. Our contractor will start on the northern half and work his way down. He's using parts of Hardy Park, and there's a lot by the bridge that he's going to use as a staging area. But we've already contacted the GO Line, the school district. They are going to reroute buses. We have, as of this week, you'll see the changeable message sign being placed on that road, informing the public. As of today, we started putting that door hangers on all the residents along Barber to inform them that we are going to be closing this road for local traffic only. Local traffic meaning police, fire, and if you live in that area, what it is we're going to have parts of that road torn up, and that's a safety issue not only just for the residents and the commuters, but for the contractor. The less amount of traffic, the better. To answer your question, we are not, I would like to, but we are not raising the road, because if we did, the problems we have is then to match the grades on all the driveways, it starts raising the cost to a large point, and it starts changing the elevations, and they have to get it resurveyed. It just creates a larger issue. We would like to raise it, but a lot of time it creates an uncertainty in terms of when we start tying into all the driveways and side streets, it may double the cost of the entire project. And we're talking about a large project already, and in the future maybe, but right now, since we have other streets and deficiencies that we want to take care of, not just with streets too, with some stormwater and other projects, I'm trying to keep it within the balance of if it's good enough to just reconstruct it and put it back to where it was. I think that's what we want to do at this time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anything else, Frank?
That's it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Oh, did you have one? Excuse me.
Oh.
I didn't look. Go ahead.
Just since we're talking about signage and roadways, safety, is there anything that can be done or any plans to do anything at the intersection of Joy Haven and Barber? As you come across that bridge going towards Schumann, if you're on Joy Haven, even though the signs tell the people on Barber to slow to 25, they're not doing it. And even at 25, that makes it still a very dangerous intersection. And anyone trying to pull out, I've seen several accidents there since I live nearby. And I don't know if there's anything that can be done for that.
Actually, we're way ahead of you on that location. It's been addressed to us by many residents, as well as the council's aware of this issue. Let's go backwards in time. We put in that pedestrian bridge, we created an issue with, I hate to say sight distance, but we caused an issue regarding visibility. See, I got to watch what I say as an engineer. I don't want to put myself, in other words, I can't create a dangerous situation. See, so we have a slight visibility problem. Then when we had to redo the guardrails on that road, on that bridge, that's because the FDOT says, your bridge was deficient, mainly your guardrails, you need to upgrade your guardrails. We did that with the bridge and the guardrails. Now we have even a worse visibility at those two intersections, Joy Haven and Concha. We're aware of that. I think most of the community is aware of that. That's why they do a good job trying to edge their way out to get their vision so they can move forward. We're aware of that. I did a traffic investigation at those two locations. It's got high volumes. It doesn't meet the warrants yet, but it's getting close. Number one is accident. In the last 3 years, there's been 4 accidents there. 2 have been related to sight distance. It's 5 or more correctables when you start looking at accident locations. So you're getting real close. When you get to those numbers, of the 4, 2 definitely, 1 maybe. So you're looking at 4 accidents already. 5 or more correctable. You're in there right now. You're there, but not there yet. To help it out, we've gone through the city manager, through our council. I went to the MPO, asking them, where's their money? Where's their money? It's, money's scarce. We are looking at right now, that location has a lot of other issues, heavy traffic. It's got a school bus stop there. And there's a lot of school kids that cross there because that's the only place they could cross Barber Street. There's a program called Safe Routes to School that offers money every year. You can use Safe Routes to School infrastructure to build sidewalks or safety improvements like a traffic signal. I gave a presentation last week at the MPO Bike Advisory Committee. They endorsed the project of installing 2 signals on Barber Street under the Safe Routes to School grant. I'll be applying for it next April when it becomes available, and the money will become available and it'll be encumbered in June of that next year, so we could have the money as middle of the summer. But right now, it's a process of going through these agencies. So I went to the BPAC committee last week. Next week, I'm going in front of the MPO Traffic Safety Committee to do the same thing, and hopefully get endorsement. Work my way through, get all the endorsement. I got a meeting set up with FDOT, with their Safe Route to School people. Hopefully we get high on the ranks. And just to let you know, last year, under the MPO Safe Route to School, no one applied. 0. Money went back.
So
I'm
that
hoping-
funding's under MPO and not under the categorical of the school board?
I think the MPO is supporting us right now on this project because last year there was no money. They see this as a viable project. They see it as a huge safety project. So do we. Barber Street, as much as it's our street, it does carry regional traffic. We all know that. All that volume is not local traffic. But you know what? Every city has it. Every city has to have their collectors and arterials that have to carry some regional traffic. We all have to play the roads or transportation facilities. We just can't close it off to local people. And because they're aware of the regional traffic and regional impact, MPO is trying to help us out. So I'm hoping that next year we get the grant money, and like I said, in Safe Routes to School grant applications is tricky, and you have to have some knowledge, but I've done a lot, actually I have, and so has Cindy, put together many of these Safe Routes to School grants, and if you do it right, you get the money. And a lot of it depends on the support from the communities, and I will eventually take the same presentation to the city council and get the city council to endorse it.
Yeah, excuse me. I was just questioning. I thought I heard you said that you'd gone to the school district and was looking for some of the Safe School funding, their categorical grant.
Which ones again?
Safe Schools from the school district.
I'm not aware of that grant. It's called Safe Schools.
That's correct.
I'm not aware of that grant.
I was just curious. I thought that's what I heard you say, but you're
No, the
looking
grant-
mostly from the MPO.
Yeah,
which-
this grant
that's
from the
good.
MPO is called Safe Routes to School. It's actually money that comes from FDOT. It's actually money that comes from the feds. The federal government gives out so much money for school enhancements and school safety infrastructure. So it's actually federal dollars that gets given to FDOT. FDOT then moves it forward and provides it for all the regional cities. So it's actually called Safe Routes to School grant, and it's a federal grant that's given to all 50 states. So it's a problem because it's federalized money. So to go and get that money, you have to go through a lot of hoops. And one of the hoops is you have to have at least the very minimum, 3 public meetings. You have to have at least endorsements from the community. You have to have at least letters of support. And it just keeps going on and on and on. But I've done this before, and it's easy to do if you start early on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
That-
Frank.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Kilgore, the floor is yours again.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on the agenda where I was going to cover the proposed millage and some millage options that have been requested by the city council. I've got a chart for everybody's benefit, but I'm going to skip on ahead with the other items on here and give you an update on the insurances and the labor agreement negotiations first, and then we'll come back to the chart. As far as our RFP that we did on the general liability and workers' compensation insurance, we successfully, or I should say we were fortunate to get a much lower pricing from 2 of the 3 what I would call valid vendors. There were a couple of vendors that submitted that just simply couldn't provide a comprehensive program. But the 3 basically that we expected that are in the business of providing insurance to governmental agencies did participate, and 2 of those, like I say, were very competitive, quite a reduction actually from what we've been paying in premiums. Allegedly, the savings is because of factors in the marketplace, like the property insurance overall is, there's been less exposures, as I understand it, because you haven't had the hurricanes, you haven't had the big claims in the last several years. So they argue that all those kind of factors and the general marketplace enabled them to come down about 20% on their rates. We're talking $100,000 savings to start with, but there's also action that the state has taken and the Florida Supreme Court has taken to change the playing field, particularly with workers' comp cases. Where there used to be caps on attorney fees for claimants on workers' comp, they've said that's not fair to the attorneys. And that somehow the consumer is going to be uninclined to file a claim because they can't get they don't have enough choice in representatives because the attorneys won't take the case because they don't get a big enough return on their time. So by removing that, then of course the obvious thing is the insurance companies have to look at that and say, we're going to end up paying more to settle claims or to prosecute claims. So that was a big factor in the workers' comp. The other thing out there is that partially because of that, the agency that actually established the individual rates, I mean, they look at it statewide and they actually proclaim what the rate should be for a police officer versus a clerical person versus a construction worker, a sanitation worker, and all those categories. We pay our premium based on the amount of our payroll that's in each one of those categories multiplied by the rate of those categories. The industry is anticipating that the state has to actually take action to adopt those rates, but they're anticipating that they will, and they're anticipating the increase might be as much as 20% in the rate schedules. That these are all averages, so you can't look at any particular category, but with that in mind, about 20% of our workers' comp premium is maybe $35,000 to $40,000. So rather than me coming to you and saying, hey, we're going to save $100,000 in premiums, I'm saying we should only reduce the budget perhaps by $50,000, could stretch it to maybe $55,000, $60,000, but I think $50,000 is a firm number that I can tell you that we would be adequately budgeted for insurance with what we know or what we anticipate on probable rate increases. We had a review committee of the chief, what we call him, chief procurement officer, our purchasing guy, and Cindy Watson, our HR manager, and myself. We're a committee of three that reviewed the proposals. We've done a scoring process, and we have those results. We are maybe one day away from finalizing some research we did as far as references. So we haven't officially announced our decision, but whether we go with our current carrier, which is FMIT, the Florida Municipal Insurance Trust, which is supported by the Florida League of Cities. That's who we've had now for 14, 15 years. But we're strongly considering one of their competitors. FMIT has about 600 clients statewide. The one we're considering has about 400. So they're definitely players in the market. They presented themselves well in their presentation to us. So we're going to be making an announcement and notification tomorrow to them about our final decision on the ranking, because we think we'll have the final pieces of references together. Even so, we've got a savings there. Even if we stick with the current carrier, don't make a change, we've still got money saved. Also good news on the group employee health insurance. We had a meeting this past Friday afternoon. They have come back, if you recall, in our budget, we projected a 15% overall rate increase in health insurance. That's what we've allowed for in our numbers. Our number that's been presented after they did a bidding process with the different carriers is that we can, excuse me, we can keep the same carrier, United Healthcare, but they are proposing a different structure to the insurance. They're suggesting that we go with a copay provision that we do not have now for larger claims where the employee would pay 20% after the deductible is met. We're also talking about adjusting maybe the amount we cover the deductible. Right now, we match the deductible amount, and we're saying, well, on this card, let's match the deductible and bump it up $500 to help offset the 20% copay. Happens to me every time when I don't bring water. So, the savings on health insurance with all that we pay on the health insurance, that savings is really substantial because their rates are less than 10% increase. So we've got about $230,000 now that's budgeted for group health insurance that it doesn't appear that we need. I am recommending that we address a problem that I see in our CRA district where we allocate some of the CRA funds for landscaping the area, for keeping the street lights in that area on, the monthly bills, and janitorial services, basically operating and maintenance type expenditures. Bless your heart. Thank you. I'd like to, while we have the opportunity, I'd like to recommend that we fix that and take the savings from the group health insurance, transfer those monies out of the CRA fund, and have them funded then by general fund. So by switching that off, we're assuming that responsibility in future years, of course, in our general fund tax base. But the CRA is created for improvements, for things that will increase property values. We've made the argument, well, yeah, nice landscaping, street lights, that all helps, but, we're providing those things in other parts of the city as well without a separate source of funding. My personal philosophy and belief is that should be funded out of your general fund tax revenues. So I wanted to make that point. There's one other little shuffle I would like to see done, that we have also out of the CRA, we have started this program about matching on sewer septic tank, getting off septic tanks and connecting to the sewer. We have a grant program of up to $5,000 to encourage someone to make that move. And that's funded out of CRA. We also have the, part of the tax increase when we went to the 3.8556 mills, we said $100,000 of those additional revenues would go towards the lagoon and lagoon improvements. To me, I see a direct connection between monies we want to apply to lagoon improvements and the sewer connections, more so than how sewer connections can help further the goals of the CRA. So if you follow my thinking, what I'm saying, we have basically that $100,000 that is kind of there for future lagoon projects, but it's not specified other than we're going to pay our fees to the Indian River Lagoon Council, which is about $17,000. We spent a little bit on oyster mat projects, $10,000 or $11,000, I think, as a matching grant situation. So I'm saying for the potential grants that we might award in the coming years, that we use part of that 100,000 for that purpose, thus freeing up 100,000 that we've been allocating for the grant matching out of CRA monies. Like I say, both those issues are a means to get the CRA freed up of costs that maybe can, where the money can be diverted maybe to something that really improves the CRA districts. The last point I wanted to make is the stormwater maintenance. The employees and materials required to maintain the stormwater program are funded as a division of general fund, the Stormwater Division of Public Works. That next year is budgeted at over $900,000. We have in the past had $500,000 of stormwater fees transferred over to general fund to help offset that expense to general fund. I would like to see us increase that proportion and have stormwater fees, the $5 a month, applied to offsetting some of the stormwater operating and maintenance cost, so that the intent of the fee is to provide improvements and maintenance of the stormwater system, the stormwater utility is referred to. So I'm saying it makes sense then to increase that charge, which if we go to a rate of the stormwater fee covering 70% of the general fund's budget for stormwater, then that would be an additional $75,000 coming into general fund as a revenue. So with the $75,000 from the stormwater fees, around $50,000 each from the savings on the employee health insurance and the general liability insurances, that would free up then $176,000 that's now funded in general fund. So $176,000 is the difference between the 3.8556 mils that we base the budget on and going to the rollback rate of 3.67. As staff, the city manager and I think we want to stick to our recommendation of the 3.8556 millage. Let that difference, that savings that we've recently learned that we can enjoy, let that be saved for the rainy day. I mean, we're just looking at the economy, all the factors of, the election coming, gas prices. We're looking at all those things that we read and hear about, and we're saying, well, we haven't had a hurricane for a number of years. Are we due? Are we due some kind of another Great Recession? When you have that situation, as we learned, there's pressure then you get the high pressure to roll back the millage rate or reduce taxes to be less of a burden to the public. But that's when we're hurting too, from continuing city services. We're experiencing those same factors. Our employees need more. When we get in a situation where we're laying off employees because we can't afford to keep them on board, we're saying let's be safe. Better safe than sorry. Better to plan for the worst, and if it doesn't happen, then down the road, if we see we've kind of weathered any potential storm, then maybe that's the time you look at rollback rates or some kind of reduction. But staff thinks the prudent thing to do and the fiscally responsible thing to do is to stick to the 3.8556. If you recall from my presentation, the PowerPoint that I gave you guys, minimal impact on the citizen as far as an additional tax bill. A rollback rate on the average taxpayer probably would give them a reduction in their tax bill unless their assessment kind of increased outside the norm. But we intend to take this schedule that I passed out to you to the city council at their August 10th meeting, have it on the agenda for them to consider and to possibly kind of establish their position on the budget. You know, the public hearings aren't until September, but we'd like to know what the majority feels before we go and structure our public hearing presentations and everything based on something that's unacceptable to the council. So we want to make sure everybody's on the same page there. I think I have set up on the audiovisual to, you know, my previous presentation. If you think there's a need to go back through any of those slides that I presented before, I'm going to have that presentation available to the council. I had it when they considered the proposed millage. I had it available as well, but I didn't get into page by page. Their interest seemed to be focused on the millage, so I just focused on those particular slides. But I can further elaborate or answer questions, or you guys can take it from here as far as any any issues you might have with something I've said. So.
Thank you, Ken. Gentlemen, what we've got to consider, and we can't make a decision tonight, that's for next Monday night. Hopefully we'll have a quorum. What we've got to consider, as Ken said, is our recommendation has been, and we made the recommendation to council at 3.8556. As you know, and we all said we'd do that, that's what we wanted to do. So we've got to revisit this to see if the committee has we've got to get a consensus that either we're going to stick with that or we're going to recommend something else. So that's where we are tonight. We can talk about it, and next Monday night, any other discussion or any other thoughts on it, and then we'll get a motion. And on the, that's Monday the 8th, and on Wednesday the 10th, as Ken said, the council meets and is going to discuss it. Whether they take a vote or not, I don't have any idea. Whether, of course, we haven't seen the agenda yet, so we don't even know whether they're going to vote. Probably they'll just get a consensus of where they are on the matter. And the council, from what I saw, seemed to be of the mind to leave it where it is, at 3.8556. There was very pointed discussion, which brought us to this point, that by one council member in particular, of looking at anything else. So that's where we are. Thoughts or comments, or you want to think about it for the week and discuss it next Monday? Go ahead.
Ken, on the numbers that you just gave us, the savings that would, if the board, city council wanted to, they could go back to a rollback rate. Part of those savings, you said, would come from the health insurance. Now, that's from increasing the employee's portion as far as like copay. If that were to happen, one, is that something that would have to have union approval to do, or is that something the council can do unilaterally?
We're not required to negotiate that provision. The only thing the labor agreements do specify or include is the amount that the employee pays for their share. And that's established as a percentage. Right now, since October 1st, 2011, anybody starting with the city pays 75% of to cover their spouse or their family. 75% of the premium cost, which if you were hired prior to October 1st, 2011, before we started having to make cutbacks, then it's 50% of the cost.
Okay.
The employee's premium is covered by the city totally, but if you go into those options, you pay a percentage that is outlined in the labor agreement.
Another thing on that, along those lines, it seems to me that if the city council did go with the rollback rate, and it was made up of several savings, this being one of them, wouldn't some of the employees think that the rollback was on the backs of the employees to achieve that?
Because of our good fortune of having these savings, we're talking about reducing expenditures that don't expect anything else. That we've got the 3% in there for the results of the labor negotiations, and that's not a firm number, that's negotiable, so I don't want to go into a lot of details there, but we've got the 3% already set, we've got our reserve level set. These savings aren't, if they could, of course, be redirected to any purpose the council saw fit, as opposed to the rollback as well. That's another consideration. We're saying from staff's perspective, let's just leave it unallocated, let's put it in for a rainy day. Who's to say that they won't be directing us to, well, we've got this little special project that we think there's a need for that your budget's not covering, so allocate it there. Or we think, let's give a bone to the employees. There's a lot of ways it can go. That's why we're structuring our recommendation at this point is just put it towards our reserves, just have that as a cushion, and not get into reallocating or redistributing. We've already taken a position of what we think is a reasonable amount of spending and covering the operating and costs that we think we need to have covered with the budget appropriation. So, but the options are there. I can't say, and we're coming back to the city council next Wednesday, basically at their direction, and say, give us lower options. It would have been very easy for us to stay silent and say we don't have any savings, but since they are asking for options, and we think these are better options than looking even to the 3% allocated for raises, and say, well, reduce it on the backs of the employees,
Right.
Through a millage reduction that ties directly to reduced salaries. So I think we're being fair. I think we're being open in the labor negotiations, saying we've got as much as 3% set aside.
The reason I brought that up, personally, I agree with staying with the current millage rate and not going to what could give a wrong perception to the employees, or maybe correct perception, whichever. But I think this is a better way of going. Of course, I'm speaking for me and not the entire board here. But thanks for that information.
Yes, sir.
I like to take time to look at this over the weekend and listen to the other committee members as well. I know Jim Hill, he did bring up some valid points. That I was there, and so were you and a couple other budget officials when he bring up the specific points he had about the budget and the rollbacks and things of that nature. So I'll take a look at this, and hopefully we'll have more committee members here and to hear their opinions whether or not to continue with staff recommendation about 3.8 or consider some of the options that are available. That's all that I have right now.
My inclination at the moment is to stay with the 3.8556. And some of the things that could be upcoming or could be done. We haven't had much luck with the offer of $5,000 to help on sewer connections along the lagoon. Consideration might be to change that and up the amount and to do some publicity to see if we can get everybody, at least along Indian River Drive, close to the lagoon, onto the sewer system, because that's important. And I think, as everybody said, the city council included, is the lagoon is a priority. Also, of course, has been a continuous priority, and who knows where it's going to go, is drainage and stormwater. And I know that there are a couple of projects in mind, but they haven't come to the point of discussion in public, and they're just things that sort of picked out of the air and that need to be done. And the last point that you make, Ken, is there is a distinct possibility. Everybody's got a different opinion about where the economy is going. And I guess the best you could say about it is it's going. It isn't fantastic, it isn't horrible, but where is it going to go, and what's going to be the effect of the fall election? There's many different points as there are people about that. Enough said. So let's see what happens. Obviously, we'll see what happens next Monday and see if we can gather more folk here and make the recommendation for the next council meeting. Anybody got anything else on this matter? You all set, Ken? Microphone? Ken? Microphone?
I'm sorry, I had another thought, and I'm trying to recall it based on the comments you were making. I believe I was seeing a definite well, my mind was working about what other possibilities are out there. And obviously, if someone has a street that doesn't happen to be a priority right now, they might say, use some of this savings to address that. There's just so many angles that you can take this to. And it's really the policymakers, the city council, that'll have to make that call. If they, I've heard about, budgeting pots of money that aren't really specified as being a negative, and it is being specified. We're saying this is our rainy day fund. If, I think I should remind everybody again of the $5 million balance we have. And, the study I previously presented as far as what's the right amount of reserves to have to cover a storm incident. And just remember that if we had a storm that did 30% of damage citywide, not just to public property, but 30% damage, that could be two storms of 15% each. It could be one at 10 and one at 20. But if the combined effect in a year was 30% on our property values, and the amount of revenue that we would have coming in until those values were restored over a number of years, the $5 million is reasonable. It's adequate. We have it. We don't have to have some extensive surtax or something to build up a reserve like some cities. So we have that good fortune. But anything above the $5 million could be helpful if we did have a storm. And, that's the big fear that I would be concerned with. That you can't control Mother Nature, you can't control economic forces that would have an impact on us, so can't have too much insurance, and our insurance is basically our reserve fund. So,
I think one other comment that I might make, and it's a little bit more philosophical. A fact. The tax rate for this city is extraordinarily low, and that's nice. And we've got a lot of people on fixed income, and I being one of them. I've no desire to see taxes go up. Incrementally, we're talking practically nothing to speak of. And the services offered by this city, given its tax base and the amount of money that it collects, are frankly amazing. Our parks, the waterfront, we're fixing the roads. The city is doing an amazing job, and we're doing it very inexpensively. We don't have a huge employee overhead. Our productivity level is, to my estimation, very high. And there are things that need to be done, and that's one of the reasons I think we need to stick with this for now and in the foreseeable future. Enough said.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we've had 2 meetings so far where we have not had a quorum. The meeting prior to that we did have a quorum, the board made a recommendation that we recommend to the city council that we stay with the current millage. If we were not to have a quorum next week, would that recommendation still stand?
Let's see, in my opinion, silence from the committee, the answer, Mr. Hall, would be yes. I'll speak to our lack of quorum. It's always a problem in the summer for people to make these meetings, but they know that these meetings are important. Very candidly, I'm going to have a conversation with the city manager tomorrow, and I'm going to ask him to communicate with our members, and you'll see it, I hope. Make sure that we get them here next Monday, unless they're on vacation or out of town, and I can understand that.
I'm looking at the budget calendar, and on the calendar, it doesn't really stress the importance of next Monday's meeting, and I think if we could stress that importance to the members, that we may be able to get a quorum.
I'll be discussing it, as I say, with Ken and the city manager tomorrow, or as soon as I can round the two of them up in one space, which sometimes is hard to do. And get a communication out this week, tomorrow, or tomorrow's Tuesday, at least by Wednesday, so that everybody's got a notification. Ken?
excuse me, yeah, Mr. Hall is totally correct. The original calendar only indicated next week's meeting was going to be the third quarter budget review. It wasn't designed originally to address the next year budget. So we will make every effort to stress to them the importance. And personally, I agree with Ed. If, silence is a yes.
So if we come to that, that's what we'll do. And that's what I'll say to the council. Okay, we all set there? We have no new business, public input. We have one public. No public input. Ken, do you have anything else?
I really don't. I don't
Microphone?
Thank you. I really don't have any other comments. I kind of feel obligated to say something about the labor agreements, but, you know, in fairness to the process, I don't want to go making statements that either say something's not up for discussion or not. But I will just generally say that we've had meetings to go through both contracts, and I think it's going very well. I think we're on a similar page that we want what's best for the workforce. We want to do some things that are right, not just because it's not written, but because we think it's a good change. You know, I think both sides are working very cooperatively on that. So we are, I think, happy that we can take the time to go through paragraph by paragraph and not only make sure there's no objection, but make sure there's understanding of what each paragraph means, and, you know, hopefully avoid ongoing confusion by the workforce about, you know, what provisions they do have, you know, what process should they follow if they're not happy with the results of some action. And so I'm feeling real good about the process. I think generally everybody should be pleased with the outcome. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. One quick question. For next week, are you going to have the third quarter? I know you're buried.
I am. I'm doing what I would think is normally like a 2-day process of solid time to put that report together. And I'm trying to get it done in between my other responsibilities over the next couple of days, so.
If you do, you do, and if you don't,
Well, I'm pretty,
we'll handle it some other
I'm
time.
pretty obstinate that way. You know, that's my target, and I'll probably for sure get it in, hopefully in the mail to y'all sometime after Wednesday.
Okay.
I've got to get, you know, with council being August 10th, I've got to get it in their agenda packet, which is due on Wednesday. I might be able to use Thursday to get, you know, as an attachment to the agenda item. That might be allowed by the manager, but I'm sure by the end of the week I'll get some kind of advanced copy to y'all and a budget, an agenda out.
Okay. Thank you. Gentlemen, anything else? Okay. With that, we're adjourned.